All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Nausea is something we've literally all experienced. And usually, our only thought is just wanting it to stop. But today, we're exploring the absolutely fascinating biological reasons why our bodies actively force us to feel sick and the modern evidence-based ways to manage it. The sheer complexity of the gut-brain axis orchestrating this whole feeling is just mind-blowing.
Here's exactly what we're mapping out today. 1. The neuroscience of nausea. 2. Debunking the brat diet. 3. Pharmacological antiemetic treatments. 4. Natural remedies and acupressure. And 5. Managing nausea in pregnancy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The neuroscience of nausea. So, why does your brain intentionally make you sick? It sounds completely counterintuitive, right? Why would your own biology subject you to such a miserable feeling? Well, feeling nauseous is actually a brilliant, ancient evolutionary survival mechanism. Long before we had anything resembling modern medicine, early life forms developed this system in the brainstem to safeguard against poisoning. It's a deeply ingrained defense network that literally seizes control of your motor neurons to violently expel whatever is in your stomach, all just to save your life. Now, what's truly fascinating here is the chemoreceptor trigger zone, or the CTZ. It sits right in the medulla, specifically on the floor of the fourth ventricle. But functionally, it actually operates outside your typical blood-brain barrier. It has these specialized capillary beds that lack tight endothelial junctions. This essentially turns the CTZ into a highly permeable, constant poison detector that's directly sampling your bloodstream and cerebrospinal fluid for systemic threats. To do its job, the CTZ is loaded with specific chemical receptors acting like biological sentinels. We're talking dopamine, serotonin, neurokinin, histamine, and opioids. They are constantly monitoring the blood. For instance, if those serotonin receptors detect toxins from a gut infection, they fire action potentials. These signals shoot directly to a central pattern generator in the brainstem, which instantly coordinates the exact physical, muscular movements of vomiting. It's an incredible feedback loop. Moving on to Section 2, debunking the brat diet. Okay, so once this nausea cascade begins and your digestive system is compromised, how should we actually feed the body to recover? For decades, doctors preached the brat diet, bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast. But modern gastroenterology has actually shown it's severely deficient. It entirely lacks the protein, the healthy fats, and the fiber that your enterocytes, those cells lining your gut, desperately need to regenerate. Without those key macronutrients, you simply cannot repair the damaged intestinal mucosa or support your gut microbiome's resilience after an illness.
And this perfectly illustrates why that old advice often made things much worse. The brat diet is super heavy on simple carbohydrates. When large concentrations of simple sugars hit your gut, they create an osmotic gradient. Think of it kind of like a giant sponge. The sugars literally pull water out of your bloodstream and dump it right into your bowel. This prolongs and significantly worsens watery diarrhea. It's exactly why pediatric guidelines now firmly recommend getting back to a normal balanced diet within 24 hours of hydration.
So how do we build a clinical recovery step by step? First, you start with clear liquids, things like oral rehydration solutions or bone broth to prevent dehydration without stressing the gut's motility. Then you introduce easy-to-digest starches to get some immediate cellular energy. Finally, the absolutely critical step, high protein and soft solids. Protein is essential here because digesting it actively stabilizes the electrical rhythms of your stomach. It literally calms gastric slow-wave dysrhythmias, all while providing the amino acids you need to rebuild those mucosal tissues.
Section 3. Pharmacological antiemetic treatments.
Because sometimes dietary changes simply aren't enough. When that vomiting center gets stuck in a relentless feedback loop, we have to turn to medical interventions. To medically intercept the brain's vomit command, we have to match exact neurotransmitter pathways to specific drug antagonists. Got a stomach bug dealing with chemotherapy? A serotonin antagonist like ondansetron targets 5-HT3 receptors. If the nausea is stemming from gastroparesis or a bad migraine, dopamine antagonists like metoclopramide step in. And for motion sickness or vestibular nausea, we use antihistamines to block the specific pathways running from your inner ear straight to your brain. But we've got to be incredibly careful here, because pharmacology requires treating the whole biological system, and there are trade-offs. Drugs like metoclopramide actually cross over into the central nervous system and carry extrapyramidal risks. That means they can cause involuntary Parkinson-like muscle movements, along with cardiac electrical issues known as QT prolongation. Because of these severe systemic side effects, clinical guidelines strictly limit its use to a maximum of 5 days. You always have to weigh the intervention against the systemic cost. Section 4. Natural remedies and acupressure.
Now, for those trying to avoid systemic side effects, the science behind certain natural interventions is actually incredibly robust. Take the P6 acupressure point on your inner forearm. It's located about 3 finger breadths below your wrist. Pressing this isn't just some placebo effect, it is hardcore neurobiology. It excites specific A-delta and A-beta sensory nerve fibers, which fire signals right up your spinal cord, telling your hypothalamus to release endogenous beta endorphins directly into your cerebrospinal fluid. These natural endorphins then bind to your central opioid receptors, elevating your body's baseline antiemetic tone and physically calming the vagal contractions of your stomach.
And we definitely can't forget about the power of ginger. The active phytochemicals in ginger, specifically gingerols, actively accelerate gastric emptying and block serotonin receptors directly within the gut microbiome itself. Clinical studies actually show that consuming exactly 250 milligrams of ginger 4 times a day reduces nausea in a staggering 84% of pregnant patients compared to a placebo, which is a perfect pivot to our final, highly critical topic.
Section 5. Managing nausea in pregnancy.
Up to 75% of all pregnancies are affected by recurrent nausea and vomiting. Dismissing this as just morning sickness is a massive disservice to the biology at play here. This isn't just an annoyance. It's a massive, systemic physiological adaptation that requires structured clinical management to protect both the mother's metabolism and the developing fetus.
During pregnancy, these biological systems become deeply interconnected. You have this massive surge in human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG, along with estrogen. And those hormones don't just stay localized in the reproductive system. They crosstalk with the central nervous system, overstimulating the brain's vestibular system, while simultaneously altering the gut's background motility. It effectively lowers the overall threshold for your brainstem to just pull the nausea alarm.
So how do we manage this? The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists uses a very specific first-line treatment algorithm. Because pooling gastric acid heavily triggers that emetic reflex, the fundamental, absolute first step is dietary structuring. You can never let the stomach get completely empty, and you need to keep high-protein snacks nearby. If those lifestyle modifications fail, the FDA-approved first-line medical response is a combination of vitamin B6, also known as pyridoxine, and doxylamine.
If left unmanaged, a percentage of these cases escalate to hyperemesis gravidarum. This is severe. We're talking weight loss of 7% or more and ketonuria, which indicates the body has literally shifted into acute starvation mode. This is often accompanied by elevated liver enzymes or abnormal electrolytes and requires immediate IV fluid intervention. But here's the catch. Nutritional therapy has to be reintroduced very, very slowly to avoid refeeding syndrome. That's a potentially fatal shock to the body's electrolyte balance that happens when food is suddenly metabolically available again after starvation.
This specific clinical insight is profoundly important. Timely nutritional hydration isn't just about making the mother more comfortable day to day. Protecting the mother from starvation during severe nausea prevents epigenetic stress on the baby. It's absolutely critical for preventing adult diseases and ensuring the long-term metabolic health and longevity of the offspring. It's a prime example of how these physiological systems cascade into long-term outcomes.
So, we've seen how a tiny bundle of nerves in the brainstem, designed millions of years ago to stop us from eating toxic plants, now interacts with modern drugs, complex diets, and pregnancy hormones. Understanding this intricate web of our biology proves that sometimes the best way to heal is to step back, look at the anatomy, and understand exactly why our body is fighting back in the first place, which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. If this ancient poison detector still wields so much systemic power over us today, what other vestigial defense mechanisms are silently directing your modern health right now? Thanks for diving into this explainer with us.